Welcome back to my channel. In this video, I am going to be sharing with you a movement that I personally feel is a huge game changer when it comes to technique. Once you use this movement, it's going to help you with your posture, it's going to help you with your strength and fluidity in your belly muscles, and it's going to be a foundational piece of so many movements that we use in this dance from beginner to professional level. I point out this movement because as I travel and teach around the world, I find it is one of the moves that a lot of people aren't learning very early on in their dance and struggle with it as they learn and advance into higher levels. So let's jump in and demystify this movement. So, what is this movement that I find so important? Drum roll. It is the pelvic tilt or the pelvic lift. This movement, basically, I'm using my low abdominals to manipulate my pelvis, rotating forward and back, or we can also say lifting the hip bones, dropping the tailbone, and then releasing. So the thing that's so important about this movement is that we're learning how to, one, engage and work into our low core muscles, which tend to be the weakest part of the abdominals on women's bodies, especially if you've had kids or anything like this. It can be very hard for women to engage and connect into these muscles. The other thing that it gives us is coordination between these muscles and the pelvis. So very often when people walk into class, they move their pelvis by squeezing their butt. These are generally much stronger muscles than these are. So people will often squeeze and never ever work into those low core abdominal muscles to do movements like circles, to do movements like rolls and undulations from our abs, which is where we want to be doing them, not from the glutes, not from the back. So I'm going to show you a little exercise before we even start dancing on the floor that's going to help you find these muscles, find this coordination, okay, and strengthen the muscles themselves. And then we're going to come back here and we're going to dance. You want an empty wall space, and you want to have your feet a little bit away from the wall, slight bend in the knees so that you're not locking into your knee joints, you're relaxing into your glutes and your hips. Now try to bring your shoulders and the back of head onto the wall so that we have a nice open, straight posture in our upper body. And here, what you'll find is your sacrum here, or we can say kind of the tailbone area, is against the wall, shoulders and head are against the wall. When these points are against the wall, you'll feel that natural arch in your back. Your low back and your mid back are gonna rest away from the wall. So what you wanna do, again with a slight bend in the knees so that we're not working the legs at all, is you want to use your low belly to pull your low back and press it into the wall. So what we're training here is we're using this isolated position to focus on the abs, driving a pelvic rotation and pushing the low spine back into the wall, which is straightening it and sending the tailbone down. So we want to go in and out, in and out. Lift my arms so you can see the movement here. And again, you can see my knees are not active, my glutes, my hips are not active. I'm really trying to use my low belly to push my low back into the wall. This is an amazing exercise because it helps us find the muscles that we want to be using and isolate those muscles in an exercise that is really safe for your body. It is really low impact, so you can really start feeling the movement and start feeling the strength without putting any stress on your body. Some of these movements, especially isolated core movements, if we're just trying to learn the movement itself away from the wall, it's often too hard for our bodies to isolate the right muscles. So adding an exercise like this can really help us capture the movement so that when we step away from the wall, we know what we should be feeling and thinking about. Now that we've found our muscles and felt the foundational movement in isolation on the wall. Now let's try actually doing it standing away from the wall as we are dancing, okay? So I'm gonna have my weight even on my feet, front and back, so that I'm not sitting back in my heels. And you can give a tiny bit of softness to your knees and put your hands here on your low belly, okay? And I want you to try to replicate that same movement. So pulling up and in with the low belly muscles, shortening the space between the belly button and pubic bone, and dropping and lengthening the low back. As you practice this movement here, what I want you to do is, again, make sure we're relaxing the glutes. We're sending the movement into the core muscles, and we're not feeling tension or pressure in the low back. So make sure when you go out, you're not pressing into an arched low back. I like to go from a nice neutral position to in, neutral to in, lifting the hip bones, lengthening the tailbone down, keeping the hips and the booty relaxed, keeping that slight bend in the knees. Now, another foundational move that you can add into this is coordination with the legs. This will become important when we use this movement on top of walking steps and on top of undulations. So as I'm going in with my belly, down with my tailbone, I'm just going to add an extra bend in my knees to shift my thighs forward and then release to neutral. Pelvis comes to neutral, legs come straight. What this bend in the knees does is it gives us that extra room to drop even further down into the pelvis and deeper into the abdominal muscles. So I go 1 and 2. Place the fingers on the shoulders, bring the elbows a little bit forward and up, and try not to collapse in the upper body as we do this movement with the belly and the abs. We're going 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2. Now, come back to just the movement by itself without the legs and try to shift weight, doing that same tuck and release, in, out, belly in, belly out, lifting the hip bones and dropping the hip bones. So it's good to get used to doing this movement as we're shifting weight here, isolating the pelvis, layering it on top of a weight shift, and bringing our legs into it, bending and straightening, which we're going to use, like I said, for moving variations of this movement. Tips for practicing this movement. So again, really good to use strengthening drills like the one on the wall just to get the base muscle engagement that we want to be using for the movement. When you're standing away from the wall and practicing this move inside of your other moves, again, the main things I want you to practice on are your body alignment. So making sure that your weight is even on front and back of the foot, that we're not sitting into the heels, which is going to give us this kind of press back in the pelvis. We want the weight even so that we can sink and drop the hips under the chest like they're hanging from a string. Here, relaxed and centered under the chest. And then as you practice, really focus on what muscles are engaging and what muscles are relaxing. Really try to get that relaxation in the back of the legs and really work the low abs to drive the movement. The last thing you want to keep checking in on as you're practicing is your upper body to make sure that as you're doing this low ab contraction, you're not pulling the upper body down at the same time. So lifting up and in, keeping the upper body open, okay? So again, we can practice our pelvic tilts in isolation. We can practice them with that variation in the legs. We can do it with a weight shift, and we can do it with a step here as we work our legs into the movement. These are the best ways to practice this move and really get it into your body and into your practice routine. So how do we actually use this movement in our dance? As I said before, this is a core movement that appears in a lot of different technique as one of the parts of the move. So, first of all, this strength, it's going to help us with our posture, with holding our body strong, keeping our balance as we move around the floor, and keeping our glutes relaxed. When we are able to move our technique, move our movement into the front of the body and really connect with our deep front core muscles, it's more easy to relax the hips, it's easy to relax the glutes. But movement-wise, this is going to be a movement that we see factor into our moving undulations up to down, down to up, our stationary undulations and rolls of the pelvis and the belly here and here. It's going to factor into our belly and pelvic pops, both moving and stationary here. And we have a million different variations of little accents, shimmies, layers that we're going to use with this movement as well. So you're going to find this little piece of technique turn up in a ton of moves. It'll give you, like I said, more connection and control to be able to work through the abdominals as you do these moves. And it'll make you feel more stable and more grounded in your hip work and your body. There we have it. I hope that this movement was absolutely a game changer for you, got you in touch with your core and your low belly muscles, and that deep pelvic belly-driven hip movement that is so important for juicy, deep, grounded hip work. I find that when students really work on and master this movement, that it adds fluidity to their dance, it adds depth to their movements, and it brings more awareness and stability into your body so that you can feel confident while you're moving. If you want more tips on things that you should be learning early on that are really going to help your learning process, go ahead and check out my other video, which is 10 things I wish I knew when I was starting my dance journey. Go ahead and check it out, and I'll see you in the next video.